Hello and welcome to today's session, the official launch of the Davos Lab Youth Recovery Plan. Today we welcome members of the Global Shapers community and live stream guests to the World Economic Forum studio. We want this session to be as interactive as possible, so if you're joining us on Zoom, turn your cameras on, say hello in the chat, and tell us if you hosted a Davos Lab dialogue in your city. We want to hear from you and recognize your remarkable efforts. Today's session will have two parts. In part one, you'll hear from some of the members of the World Economic Forum team who made today's launch possible. And in part two, you will have the opportunity to connect with the lead authors in breakout groups on the top headlines of the Youth Recovery Plan. Download the plan at wef.ch/reports and grab yourself a coffee because you won't want to miss this. Let's get started. Over to you, Wadia.
Today is the International Youth Day, and if there was ever a time in which the voices of young people must be heard and acted upon, now is that time. In today's session, we will showcase the results of the Davos Lab initiative, a multi-stakeholder approach to better understand the changing views and expectations of the next generation on society, governments, and businesses in light of the ongoing pandemic. As you know, the Global Shapers community was created 10 years ago to support young people to grow their skills and extend their impact to shape a more resilient and equitable future. And as the head of the Global Shapers community, I've never been prouder of the community than right now. The idea that we need to rebuild differently after COVID-19 is widely shared. The window for action is open, and our community moved so quickly to provide the world's first youth-driven recovery plan, featuring 40 recommendations for a more sustainable and inclusive post-pandemic world. In a short time, you organized over 300 dialogues in 150 cities, engaging more than 2 million people around the world. And today, we are here to celebrate your remarkable efforts. In part one of this session, you will hear from those here at the World Economic Forum who helped make this work happen. And in part two, you will have the chance to connect with the authors of the Youth Recovery Plan, the Davos Lab Task Force, to hear their insights, ideas, and calls to action. We are so excited to have you here with us. So let's jump in. To kick things off, we'll start with a message from Professor Klaus Schwab.
Dear participants, dear Global Shapers, 10 years ago, I created the community of Global Shapers as a means, as a force to shape our common future. This engagement of the young generation never has been more important than now, where we have to face the consequences of the pandemic of COVID-19. Therefore, over the past year, Global Shapers organized dialogues in 146 cities around the world on the most pressing issues facing society, government, and business. The results of this truly global, multi-stakeholder effort, which we called Davos Lab's Youth Recovery Plan, presents both a stark reminder of our urgent need to act and provide compelling insights for creating a more resilient, a more sustainable, and a more inclusive world. One of the unifying themes of the discussions which you had was the lack of trust young people have for existing political, economic, and social systems. You are fed up with the ongoing concerns of corruption and stale political leadership, as well as the constant threat to physical safety caused by surveillance and militarized policing against activists and people of color. In fact, more young people hold faith today in the governance by artificial intelligence than by fellow human beings. Facing an ever more fragile labor market and almost bankrupt social security systems, almost half of you who have been surveyed said that you felt you had inadequate skills for the current and future workforce requirements. And almost a quarter of you said you would risk falling into debt if you are faced with unexpected medical expense. The fact that half of the global population remains without internet access presents additional hurdles. Waves of lockdowns and the stresses of finding work or returning to workplaces have even amplified the existential and often silent mental health crisis. So, what should you do? Use the millennials and the Generation Z. What should you do differently? Most immediately, you are calling for the international community to safeguard vaccine equity, to respond to COVID-19 and prevent future health crises. Nobody will be safe if not everybody is vaccinated. Young people, you are rallying behind the global wealth tax to help finance more resilient safety nets and to manage the alarming surge in wealth inequality. You are calling for programs that help you and young progressive voices join government and become policymakers, and to contribute, as it should be, to the decision-making in the political, social, and economic areas. To limit global warming, you are demanding to halt to coal, oil, and gas exploration, to the development and to the financing of this exploration. As well, you are asking firms to replace any corporate board directors who is unwilling to transition to cleaner energy sources. You are championing an open internet and a 2 trillion digital access plan to bring the world online and prevent internet shutdowns. And you are presenting new ways to minimize the spread of misinformation, and you want to combat dangerous extremist views in the internet. At the same time, you are speaking up about mental health and calling for investment to prevent and tackle the stigma associated with it. Transparency, accountability, trust, and the focus on stakeholder capitalism will be the key to meeting this generation's ambitions and expectations. We must entrust you to have the power to take the lead, to create meaningful change. I'm inspired by the countless examples of young people, of you, pursuing collective action by bringing together diverse voices to care for the communities, for your communities, from providing humanitarian assistance to refugees, to helping those most affected by the pandemic, to driving local climate action. Your examples provide the blueprints we need on the micro level to build the more resilient, inclusive, sustainable society on the macro level, and the economy we need in the post-COVID-19 world. Dear global shapers, We are living together in a global village, and it's only by dialogue, understanding each other, and having particular respect for another that we can create the necessary climate for a peaceful, for an inclusive, and for a sustainable world. I want to thank you for your engagement, which is so essential for the future. And I can promise you that we at the World Economic Forum, and I personally, will do everything in order to ensure that your recommendations are listened to and hopefully are followed up. In a world where half of the population is under the age of 30, and where your future is at stake, we absolutely need not only your critical voice, but also your active engagement into society to address on a macro and on a micro level the problems we have to solve, the challenges we have to confront. Again, thank you for your work. Thank you for remaining optimistic about the future, because only if we have ourselves face into our future, only if we ourselves remain optimistic, we can create a better world.
Thank you, Professor Schwab, for your remarks and all the work that you do behind the scenes to drive intergenerational allyship in the international community, but also in the World Economic Forum's work around the world. You are a true ally and a champion for young people everywhere. One of the things that stood out to me in your remarks was your reiteration of the lack of trust young people have for existing political, economical, and social systems. In the Youth Recovery Plan, participants expressed that they are fed up with ongoing concerns of corruption and stale political leadership. In fact, more people said that they hold faith in governance by systems of artificial intelligence than by actual fellow human beings. Young people called for more programs to support their progressive peers into politics. This is a powerful reflection and something I strongly believe in too. That's why we work with the Apolitical Academy and the Climate Reality Project to help global shapers enter and influence politics, and I'm eager to continue this important work with all of you. I want now to turn to one of the lead authors of the Davos Lab Youth Recovery Plan, Abdullahi Alim. Abdullahi, what stood out to you in the Davos Lab Youth Recovery Plan, and what our viewers must not miss as reflections?
Thank you, Wadia. Let me just first build off what you originally shared. If there's any value that has truly come from this pandemic, it is that it forced us to confront and reckon with some of the underlying challenges in our communities. Just think of the unbelievable levels of wealth inequality, the corruption, the silent pandemic of mental illness, and of course, the disastrous effects of climate change that still await us. And I know the temptation for us to simply go back to some kind of normal, but to be honest, normal was the problem. And today, we have a very rare and narrow opportunity for us to build back better and leave that old norm behind. Let me be very, very clear. Nothing is off the table. Any and every idea at this stage is worth considering. But remember, nothing is also guaranteed. We must put in the hours and the effort to ensure the ideas, the recommendations that are featured throughout this recovery plan come to bear. That's why we're calling on every global shaper to begin local conversations with your governments, with businesses, and other decision makers to really bring this to life. This project is not about us here at HQ. And dare I say, it's not about you either. It's bigger than that. It's about the millions of people that were born into this pandemic over the last year or so, and the next generations that will come into a world after us with far, far greater examples of inequality. This is about us being good ancestors and doing all that we can to ensure they experience less challenges than our own generation today. Before I pass it back to Wadia, I really want to just thank each and every one of us who've hosted the over 300 dialogues around the world, engaging upwards of 2 million people. You were gracious enough to bring the Davos Lab into your communities, into your schools and workplaces, into your clubhouse chat rooms, into your places of congregation, and in some cases into your family home as well. It really has been an honor for me to help support this initiative alongside the remarkable Davos Lab Task Force, who are joining us from around the world too. Thank you so much.
Wow, Abdullahi, these are such important reflections. Thank you for sharing your wisdom as usual and for driving the Youth Recovery Plan forward from the start to finish. This was your vision and you brought it so successfully to life, and I couldn't be more impressed or inspired. To our participants, you've heard highlights from Professor Schwab and Abdullahi, but the real richness comes from reading the recovery plan. Our team has shared the link to the recovery plan in the chat and on our social media channels, along with other resources that you can use to help us amplify its findings. You have access to a press release, social media amplification toolkit, template messages, and more. So please, please help us to spread the word and demonstrate the powerful role young people must play in policy making and solution building in the post-pandemic era. You have the most innovative ideas and the energy to build a better world, and now it's time to do so. Let's make 2021 the year to think and act long-term to make intergenerational parity and partnership the norm. With this, let's move on to part 2 of this session. And this is now where you will get to hear from the lead authors of the Davos Lab Youth Recovery Plan, members of the amazing task force. Natalie, can you please tell us more about the part 2 of the sessions and the work that the amazing task force did?
Of course I can. Up next, we want to recognize the amazing people who made this initiative happen. As you know, the Davos Lab was a major multi-stakeholder effort, and we'd like to thank our partners at Impact School, Realize Hub, UNICEF, and Catalyst 2030 for helping us to reach this moment. But more than anyone, we want to recognize the lead authors of the recovery plan, the amazing members of the Davos Lab Task Force who were the driving force behind this work. I know you're on the line, so please turn your cameras on and give us a giant wave. Our task force members, including our co-chairs Alexis, Miguel, Rumeitha, and Sikander, have worked tirelessly for the last 8 months to bring the recovery plan to life, and we couldn't be more excited. In part 2 of this session, you will have the chance to connect with them and hear their takeaways. For Global Shapers, you'll see shortly a prompt at the bottom of your screen to join one of 10 breakouts on the 10 pillars of the Youth Recovery Plan. The pillars represent the 10 issues that the task force identified as the most pressing when it comes to our collective future. Select a pillar and join an insightful conversation. If you're joining on our live stream or social media channels, thank you for following this session. You can visit wef.ch/reports Youth Recovery Plan to read the insights and ideas. We'll end this session in breakout groups, so with this, we appreciate your efforts to ensure that the recommendations of the Youth Recovery Plan are heard and acted upon.